We hope the worst was over, but tonight we have a fresh tragedy to report from the state's bushfire zone. A large air tanker heading to the snowy mountains has crashed, killing 3 people on board. The crew members were from the United States, part of a team who'd travelled here to help when we needed them most.
A stoic fire chief, Shane Fitzsimmons, breaking the news to a devastated premier. Bomber 134 and its 3 American crew lost while fighting fires east of Cooma. This was the C-130 Hercules in action. It arrived in August on lease from Canadian company Coulson Aviation. Its mission today, bombing a bushfire in the snowy Monero region.
The epicentre of China's killer virus is tonight in lockdown, the city closing its transport network, telling its 11 million people not to leave. 17 people are now confirmed dead, while a new case has turned up in Hong Kong.
One of the last flights out of virus central Wuhan in China, landing in Sydney. It escaped the lockdown around a city which spawned the outbreak. They were screened before takeoff in Wuhan. Then everyone, including the crew, wore face masks. The city of 11 million was put into quarantine when the death toll doubled from the pneumonia-like virus.
The Chinese authorities have now stopped transport out of Wuhan city, including after the flight today to Sydney. There will be no more flights from Wuhan city, we're being advised, nor will there be other transport out of Wuhan to other parts of China.
"15 months after the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the kingdom's consulate in Istanbul, the fallout continues. Jeff Bezos, the boss of the world's largest online shop Amazon, also owns the Washington Post, the newspaper Khashoggi wrote for. He's now at the centre of a hacking probe. UN human rights experts, including Agnes Callamard, who investigated Khashoggi's murder, say they've looked at forensic analysis that points to data being stolen from Bezos's phone in 2018. That happened after Bezos received WhatsApp messages from the personal account of the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Possibly, the experts say, to try and influence articles in the Washington Post.
A day of protests was organized by regional governors and mayors who are traveling to Athens on Thursday to present their demands to the government. An estimated 10,000 people joined the demonstration on 3 Greek islands. Local officials say the protest is a loud and clear message that the situation on the islands of the North Aegean can no longer be tolerated by residents or by migrants. The United Nations Refugee Agency says there are about 100,000 migrants and refugees in Greece, with close to 40,000 on the islands. Moria camp on Lesbos is severely overcrowded. With a capacity for 3,000, it is housing about 19,000 people, according to the government figures. There are reports of deaths due to accidents, illness, or violence.
The people versus the state. Lebanon is in turmoil. Anti-establishment protesters briefly broke through security barriers outside Parliament Square. There is anger over a new government. For hours, anti-riot police tried to quell the unrest using tear gas and water cannons. But the few hundred young men were defiant, challenging security forces for hours, using rocks, stones, and firecrackers. The most violent and aggressive since the protest movement against the political class began in October. Anger is escalating among the Lebanese, who are demanding a new leadership. They believe the new cabinet reflects the previous one. Protesters are not convinced politicians will carry out the needed reforms because that would mean losing access to the state's resources for personal gain.
Attacks by the Bashar al-Assad-led regime on northwest Syria have killed a number of civilians, mostly women and children, in the past few days. Those who survived the attacks are escaping in a new wave of displacement. Najib Bakour, the head of the White Helmets in Atarib, says the regime's attacks are meant to instill fear in the hearts of the civilians.
This has been the most significant increase in violence in rural western Aleppo since 2018. And the Russian-backed Assad regime campaign is targeting places like this, where civilians are the main target. And security experts tell us that the situation may get worse in the very near future.
On day one of the Harvey Weinstein trial, both the defence and the prosecution laid out their opening arguments, giving us a glimpse, so to speak, of what kind of evidence we can expect over the course of this 6-week-long trial. The prosecution portrayed Harvey Weinstein as a sexual predator and as a rapist, a man who abused his immense power in the entertainment industry in order to take advantage of women and commit sex crimes. He is accused of 5 sex crimes, including rape, and the accusations come from 2 women, despite the fact that he has been accused by over 80 women of some form of sex crime or another. This case centres on accusations from 2 women, one who says that he forcibly performed oral sex on her in 2006, and the other who says that he raped her in 2013.
We know that everybody knows the rules. I don't like what you did in front of me. Go out. I'm sorry, it's not. Okay, knows the rules. Nobody has to provoke. Nobody, okay? We keep calm. We have a wonderful talk. The telephone is a great job in the city. I do appreciate.
Some of Ontario's biggest hospitals are filled beyond capacity nearly every day. That's according to new analysis from CBC News. Overcrowding is so bad, hospital beds are now being placed in hallways and conference rooms.
Vashi, it is all over this province, in big hospitals and small ones, in the north, in the south, in the urban areas, in the rurals. It is everywhere. We've heard occasional anecdotes about people spending long chunks of time on stretchers in hallways, and they're horrible, compelling stories, but I wanted to try to get a sense of the big picture of how often this is happening. So I did a Freedom of Information request, got all the data for every single hospital in the province every single day in the first half of last year.
The Titanic, more than a century after it sank, it still has somewhat mythical status, but it's in a very fragile state. And last year, divers found that it was decaying, and there are fears that it may break up altogether in the coming years. Now, it's been on the ocean bed of the Atlantic, some 4 kilometres down, for 108 years. Of course, it famously sank on its maiden voyage across the Atlantic after hitting an iceberg. It's the stuff of legend, and of course, we all know about that film of 20 years ago or so. The wreck was only discovered discovered in 1985 by Bob Ballard and his expedition, but since then there's been lots of activity with expeditions and divers visits. This agreement between the UK and the US means there'll be greater protection than before. Both those two governments can effectively veto applications to visit the site or remove artefacts from the wreck, so they will have the power to grant or deny licenses.